Welcome to the second quarter's 2026 ransomware report. In this update, we examine how the ransomware landscape has evolved over the past quarter. We analyze overall attack volumes, the activity of the most prominent ransomware groups, industry targeting, and global geographic trends. By comparing these findings with previous quarters, we identify key shifts in attacker behavior and highlight the sectors and regions facing the greatest levels of risk. Whether you're responsible for cybersecurity strategy, risk management, or incident response, this report provides practical insights to help organizations better understand the current threat landscape and prioritize their defensive security efforts. Ransomware numbers. Ransomware activity increased significantly during Q2 of 2026. Recorded attacks were rising from 2,282 in Q1 to 2,579 in Q2, which equates to a 13% increase quarter over quarter. The number of active ransomware groups also grew substantially, increasing from 69 to 106, an increase of more than 53%. These figures also mark a return to the upward trend following the slight decline that we observed in Q1. In fact, Q2 actually recorded the highest number of attacks and active ransomware groups in our entire reporting period, highlighting that the ransomware threat is continuing to expand. The increase in active groups should not necessarily be interpreted as a proportional increase in organizational risk. Rather, it's an indication of an influx of potentially new threat actors. It may reflect affiliates and operators separating from established ransomware operations to launch campaigns under their own brands. At the same time, the growing availability of AI-assisted tools is reducing the technical barriers associated with things like developing phishing campaigns, malware, and supporting infrastructure. These all make it easier for threat actors to establish and maintain ransomware operations. Looking at the broader trend over the past 12 months, ransomware and data extortion activity has continued to increase despite the temporary slowdown in Q1. The key takeaway is that organizations are now facing a more diverse ransomware landscape, with activity distributed across a larger number of groups employing a wider range of tactics and techniques. For defenders, this reinforces the importance of maintaining strong cyber resilience. So, effective vulnerability management, continuous monitoring, rapid detection and response, well-tested business continuity, and recovery plans remain essential for reducing both the likelihood and the impact of ransomware incidents. Group analysis. Turning to the ransomware groups themselves, Cheilin remained the most active operator throughout Q2 26. We recorded approximately 300 successful attacks and maintained a clear lead over every other group. They were followed by the Gentleman with just over 250 attacks, and Dragon Force and Akira were third and fourth with 148 and 122 attacks respectively. Lockbit also featured this quarter with recording just over 100 attacks and were one of the 5 most active groups. The consistency of these names at the top of the rankings demonstrates that a relatively small number of operations continue to account for a significant proportion of global activity. Despite the increase in active ransomware groups observed this quarter, the leading operators remain well established and continue to demonstrate the greatest operational impact. Cheelin's continued dominance reflects its maturity as a ransomware as a service. Throughout the quarter, the group maintained broad targeting across multiple industry verticals. Its ability to compromise diverse enterprise environments, combined with its established affiliate model, has enabled it to sustain a high volume of successful attacks over multiple consecutive quarters. The presence of Lockbit is also notable. Although its activity has remained below that of the original Lockbit operation prior to the international law enforcement action in 2024, the continued use of the Lockbit name actually demonstrates the resilience of recognized ransomware branding. Established names continue to attract affiliates and retain credibility within the ransomware ecosystem, even after significant operational disruption. The increase from 69 to 106 active ransomware groups should also be viewed in context. As mentioned, the data does not necessarily indicate the emergence of entirely new threat actors. Instead, it is quite likely that some of the growth reflects affiliates or operators that have separated from established ransomware organizations to form independent groups under new branding. At the same time, AI-assisted tooling is lowering the technical barrier to entry. It simplifies tasks such as phishing, malware, and infrastructure. Together, these developments are contributing to a larger number of active ransomware groups while also allowing established operators to remain responsible for the majority of successful attacks. Industry breakdown. Looking at ransomware activity by industry, Q2 saw a notable shift in targeting priorities. While technology and manufacturing dominated during the previous quarter, business services became the most targeted sector, recording approximately 355 attacks, followed by manufacturing with just over 310 incidents. The prominence of business services reflects the strategic value of organizations that support multiple customers, business functions, and supply chains. A successful compromise within this sector can disrupt numerous downstream organizations, which increases the operational impact and potentially strengthens the attacker's position during extortion negotiations. Manufacturing also remained a consistently attractive target where downtime can rapidly translate into production losses, financial impact, and increased pressure to restore operations. Although technology and healthcare dropped to the third and fourth most targeted sectors respectively, they did continue to experience substantial ransomware activity, demonstrating that industries with valuable intellectual property, sensitive data, and complex digital environments remain high-value targets for threat actors. Overall, the data is showing that ransomware groups continue to prioritize sectors with a high dependence on information technology, with a limited tolerance for operational disruption, and a greater likelihood of paying a ransom to restore critical business functions. Rather than targeting industries indiscriminately, threat actors continue to focus on sectors where disruption creates the greatest financial and operational leverage. Examining individual ransomware groups also reveals differences in targeting strategies. Chile maintained broad activity across multiple sectors, recording a particularly high number of attacks against business services and manufacturing, but they remained highly active within technology, healthcare, and consumer services. In contrast, the gentleman demonstrated a more concentrated targeting profile, focusing primarily on manufacturing, business, healthcare, and tech. These findings suggest that while the leading groups share an interest in high value industries, each continues to demonstrate its own operational priorities. So, understanding these sector specific targeting patterns allows organizations to better assess their exposure and align defensive measures with the threat actors most likely to target them. Geographic review. The geographic distribution of ransomware activity in Q2 continues the trend of remaining heavily concentrated in a relatively small number of countries. The United States continued to be the primary target, recording 819 attacks, more than 5 times the number observed in the next most targeted country. Germany, the UK, and Canada followed with 138, 124, and 74 recorded attacks, respectively. This pattern reflects a long-established trend. Threat actors continue to prioritize countries with large, digitally mature economies, where organizations are more likely to rely on complex IT infrastructure, where they hold valuable data and possess the financial resources to meet ransom demands. Beyond these leading countries, attack volumes declined noticeably. France and Italy each recorded around 60 attacks. Australia, Spain, Brazil, Mexico, India, Japan, and Thailand experienced between 35 and 55 incidents. Although these figures are significantly lower than those recorded in the US, they reinforce that ransomware remains a global threat which affects organizations across the entire planet. Outside the top 10, most countries recorded fewer than 30 attacks. This should not be interpreted as ransomware being confined to a handful of regions, but it does demonstrate that ransomware operations do have global reach. The widespread adoption of ransomware as a service, affiliate programs, and standardized tooling enables threat actors to conduct campaigns against organizations almost anywhere with relatively little geographic limitations. The key takeaway here is that while ransomware groups do have the capability to target organizations worldwide, they continue to prioritize countries where digital maturity, economic strength, and business reliance on technology provide the greatest opportunity for a successful extortion. This targeting strategy has remained remarkably consistent over reporting periods and shows a little sign of changing. Conclusion. As we've seen throughout this report, ransomware has remained one of the most persistent and adaptive cyber threats facing organizations. Q2 saw record levels of both ransomware attacks and active groups, but the most significant takeaway is not the increase in numbers, it's how the threat landscape has continued to evolve. Established operations continue to dominate. Affiliates, rebranding, and increasingly accessible tooling are contributing to a broader and more diverse ecosystem. Established ransomware operations continue to dominate overall activity, while affiliates, rebranding, and increasingly accessible tooling are contributing to a broader and more diverse ecosystem. For organizations, this reinforces the need to view ransomware as an ongoing business risk rather than just an isolated cybersecurity issue. Reducing exposure requires more than preventative controls alone. It depends on strong vulnerability management, effective identity and access security, continuous monitoring, rapid detection and response, and a well-rehearsed recovery and business continuity plan. While the ransomware landscape will undoubtedly continue to evolve, the underlying objective of threat actors remains unchanged. They want to get paid. Understanding how these groups operate, who they target, and how these trends are changing enables organizations to make more informed decisions and improve overall cybersecurity posture. Thank you for listening to the Q2 Ransomware Report. We look forward to bringing you the next quarterly update.